Mika, I'm tired.
Me too. I slept in today.
We have to record something though, don't we?
Yeah, we need to get some on the schedule.
Yeah, otherwise our captors will never release us. I don't know how we got into this mess, but here we are. I don't know who takes podcasters hostage, but whatever.
It's the basement that creates all the podcasters.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Well, why don't we just talk about our podcasting journey so far? I think that's probably all we've got in us today.
Yeah, let's just do that. I'm too
Okay.
tired to be smart today.
All right. Well, okay, now energy. Welcome, there we go, to Thriving Between the Lines, the podcast that examines personal development books through the lens of intersectionality, making self-help content more accessible and relatable. I'm life coach and surprisingly reasonably consistent podcaster, Leslie Crudup Villagarcia.
And I'm Mika, that cliche queer with a podcast.
And together, we're not just reading between the lines, we're thriving between the lines and trying to stay awake. All right, and today we are coming to you from Meanjin, or Brisbane in Australia, land of the Yagara and Turrbal people, where it always was and always will be Aboriginal land. All right, I feel like I'm awake now. Do you feel a little bit more awake?
Awake, yes. On the ball, not as much.
That's okay. That's okay. Okay. I think our energy levels will come and go, and that's perfectly fine.
Yeah.
It's come as you are day here in the basement. All right. So, as stated before, this is a good opportunity now that we're a few episodes in to talk a bit about our journey so far in the world of podcasting as we know it today. And
Yeah.
yeah.
That sounds like a good idea.
So, we're going to talk about our personal history with podcasting and with this particular project.
Yep.
We're going to discuss some of our original concepts for what this podcast would be.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And some of the challenges that we've faced along the way.
Yeah, that's a good thing, I think, to fess up to.
Yeah. And we'll close it off with some of our hopes moving forward, what we hope that this podcast can be in the world.
As a more casual one today, I'm going to be less careful about no one hearing my my drink ice.
Oh, so you ASMR folks out there will enjoy that.
We're just sitting here having a coffee together.
Yeah. All right. So, shall we dive in?
Let's go. Arriving at basement 3.
The sub basement. Is there such thing as a dom basement?
Well,
There could be.
there could be.
There definitely is.
I have lots of opinions about the numbering of levels because it's different in Australia than it is in America.
Oh, yeah, that's a whole other podcast.
The architecture podcast.
Yeah. History. This is the history section.
Yes. How
So-
we met.
Yeah. Because those of you who have listened to our preface may have noted that when we started this podcast, we'd only known each other for about 6 months.
Yeah.
Yeah. And now it feels like we've known each other for years.
Yeah. I do tend to be one of those people that I can talk to someone for a few hours and make it seem like we've been friends for ages.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I totally get that about you. So, we met... Actually, Mika, why don't you tell this story about how we met?
Yeah, okay. we have amazing libraries here in Brisbane. And they put on all sorts of free workshops. And I saw one on the introduction to podcasting. And I've been interested in podcasts for a long time. And then was playing with the idea of wanting to do a podcast, particularly in regards to community outreach.
Yeah.
And I'll go into that more later. But I go to this very big, there was a lot of people there. I was in the biggest room. That can hold 100 so people. You would say there was like probably 50 people there.
I wasn't at the first one.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
I swear I saw you. No, yes, I remember. Yeah,
Because it was a series of 4, wasn't it?
No, it was a 3-parter.
Okay, 3.
Yeah.
So I wasn't there for the first one. I showed up for the second one.
But I met someone at the first one who knew you. And then at the second one, I was sitting near them.
Yeah.
And when they kept asking questions, I'm always one of the first to put up my hand and say something in the crowd. I don't care about talking in front of people. It's fine.
Yeah.
And I was talking about my podcast that I want to do, which is about trans people, trans guys, and outreach, community outreach sort of stuff. And yeah, you're interested in all that sort of like activism and things like that. So you immediately just like eyes across the room, like, I need to talk to that person. And so as soon as there was like actually, you might have been only a few chairs away.
Yeah, I wasn't far away from you.
Yeah. But we were kind of like, when there's a break, I want to talk to this person. And so we just straight away in chat breaks, we're just like, mouths like going full speed, kind of with our ideas and all of that.
You know what was really funny about that? Because like when the person who invited me like brought me in, I was really keen to check it out, to check out this workshop series, because I also was quite familiar with one of the people who was running it.
Oh, right. I didn't realize that.
Yeah. We were friends on Facebook.
Oh, right.
Yeah. And I remember meeting you, and there was this part of me that was like excited. I was like, this seems like a cool person. But there was this part of me that was also like, I'm not my best self today. I hope this person's not going to get an impression of me that I'm just a grouch. But you know, part of what was making me grouchy that day?
What was that?
So it was a Saturday morning. And normally what I'm doing on a Saturday morning, on any given Saturday morning, is I am at the West End Markets, which is one of our local farmers markets.
Yeah.
Making giant bubbles for the kids and the families and just for people in general.
Yeah.
It's just a thing that I've been doing for years. And I was a little grouchy that I was missing out on it that morning. And I was like, oh, but the kids, they're going to be like, where's the bubble lady? Bubble lady. And I felt like their disappointment at me not being there. And I was like, I have betrayed them. So it was just this little thing kind of bubbling away in the back of my head. I was like, okay, but try to be friendly, Leslie.
Yeah. You're always friendly.
I'm polite.
Well,
I'm not always friendly.
well, I guess it takes a very certain type of person to not get into a friendly conversation with me.
Oh yeah, there you go. You've got a very disarming quality to you.
Oh, well, thank you. Yeah, it is one of the things I like to do. I always say I can walk into any room and be the social icebreaker.
Yeah.
Maybe just because I don't care if people don't like me at this point.
I think that's a big part of it for me a lot of the time when I'm walking into rooms as well. It's like I know that in a lot of circumstances I'm going to stick out like a sore thumb. That's just the story of my life. I'm used to it. People are going to have some sort of impression of me based on how I look, based on my hair. They might ask lots of questions or I'll just be some object of curiosity.
You got an accent, which
Yeah.
also
Yeah.
we love to ask about.
Yeah. It's like, oh, where are you from? Well, no, they wouldn't ask it in that accent. Well, some would. And yeah, that's just how things usually go.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't have a specific topic for a podcast in mind. I had some ideas floating around in my head, but I have always enjoyed the idea of podcasting. As I've told you a little bit before, my very first podcast was back in 2007.
Mm-hmm.
My never released podcast due to all of my files going to data heaven. It was a travel podcast. I had told some stories about the time that I spent in Dubai and the time that I spent in Oman and almost getting abducted. Yeah, and then when I got to Vietnam, the thing drowned in a flood. That's the short version of the story. And I was like, oh, crap. But yeah. Did you have any particular podcasts that you were really into at the time that you were looking at for inspiration or anything like that?
Yeah, so I listen to a lot of just like chatty social podcasts where it's just kind of BS. It's to fill that social part in my brain while I'm doing things.
Yeah.
You just want to be hanging out with people. I always like those ones, but you gotta be people of interest for that to work. Like you have to already kind of have something.
People have to love you already.
Yeah.
They have to care whether you live or die. To then sit around and listen to what you think.
Or to just think that you're interesting enough to want to like come hang out with.
Yeah.
But what I really was there for is while going through the phalloplasty surgery journey, I realized there's just like a gap in support and things like that, particularly in places like here where we don't have the big teams of that they do in America and Europe and such with the surgery teams. And so there's a lot of just like peer support. And it's there, but it is a bit hard to find, and it is quite dependent on you having a certain type of personality that's able to speak up, and also that you have the ability to like search for information and pull through it and find the things you're looking for.
Yeah.
And I think that's just like a barrier for some people, and I want that information to be more accessible. Yeah. So I thought, hey, a podcast would be a great way to do that. And we can talk to people who have the knowledge and can disseminate that to people in an easy to consume format. So that was the plan, and still a plan that I would like to continue with, but I decided that I needed to focus on other things for the time being. Yeah. Number one, this podcast, getting to know a bit more about podcasting, because it's a lot easier to do it with someone. Yes. Than it is trying to do it all alone. Yeah. I'm not good at the executive function side of things. Yeah. I was still trying to get my like 5 to start, because you don't want to start without a catalog ready to go. Yeah. And yeah, I also just was starting to have some weird feelings around community at the time. Like I go in these fluctuations of like, oh, I want to do all this stuff to help, and then into these bummed out feelings where, you know, you have issues with people in the community and things, you're just like, screw them all, I'm just going to be on my own. Not that I'm bit past that. I wasn't completely, but sometimes I just don't want to be too visible. I just want to be like a quiet person. So I was like, what can I do behind the scenes where I'm not like too in the forefront?
Yeah.
So I've been just doing some quiet action stuff behind the scenes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm thinking of revisiting the podcast as a option when I feel like I can be on the forefront again.
Yeah. And I think it'll be such a great one to have. It'll be such a great resource when you do release it.
Yes, because we did one with you as the first test episode.
Yeah.
And I rethought whether that should be the first one because it doesn't quite play to the audience I'm going for.
Okay.
But I do want to have like two types of episode, like one for the trans guys and then one for people who are curious and want to know about us.
Right.
And like having those as separate kind of episode types.
Yeah. That's cool.
And yeah, that's the two different audiences.
I remember at the time, some of the ideas that I had floating around in my head regarding what kind of podcast to make were like, things about polyamory or something relating to personal development books. And being a life coach myself, I didn't really want to fall into there's so many podcasts out there that are two people talking and the host is interviewing people about something that they've gone through and have recovered from.
Yeah.
I understand the value in that. And it's wonderful to share people's stories of overcoming, but there are just so many of those stories that I thought, no, that's not what I'm going to do. But given that I have been hosting a personal development book club for a couple of years and have all these ideas around personal development books, it just, the idea popped into my head that I was like, well, one of my big gripes is the lack of representation of marginalized people or considerations for the experiences of marginalized people in these books. Like, we don't see ourselves in these books.
Yeah.
So we keep having to adjust the content to make any of it apply to us.
Yes.
So I was like, all right, personal development books through the lens of intersectionality.
Yeah, and when we first met, you kind of asked me whether I was interested in personal development books. And I was like, I mean, yes, but also I don't get through many because I get to points that upset me or annoy me, and then I just give up on it.
Yeah. And I've always really liked podcasts where there are two people talking about something. Some of my favorite ones from my beginning podcast listening career were like all the How Stuff Works podcasts.
Yeah.
So like Stuff You Should Know with Josh and Chuck. Always loved their dynamic.
Yeah.
In more recent years, like Nicole Byer's podcasts. I love Nicole Byer, and the one that she does with Sashir Zameda, the Best Friends podcast. I love their dynamic. And there's so many out there. Another one that I was really enjoying at the time was Maintenance Phase. So those Aubrey Gordon and Michael Hobbs talking about diet culture, wellness culture, some of the key players in those worlds as well.
Yeah.
And just really picking things apart and showing us what to look out for, essentially.
Yeah. I just realized I didn't actually mention the podcast that I was.
Okay, so just start with ones that I blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. So the podcast that I kind of was modeling my phalloplasty one on is called Sawbones. And
Oh, yeah.
it's about kind of looking at medical things historically and modern that are not quite not quite right, or misrepresented in some way, or misunderstood. And it's hosted by a doctor and her husband. And so, like, she's the knowledgeable one, he's like the adorable goofball. And together they, like, he does the jokey, she does the actual informative
Right.
stuff. And yeah, I really enjoy kind of the way they do that, with a bit of humor, but very like informative and factual.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Having the right co-host, having the right dynamic is so important in these conversations. I don't like when the two people sound exactly the same and you can't tell who's who.
Yeah.
I don't like when it's just two people trying to outdo each other either. I like when it's natural, when it's authentic, and when it feels like they're actually having fun in each other's presence.
Yeah.
And that's one reason, like, when you asked me to help you do that test recording for your podcast, when I listened back to it, I was like, wow, our voices actually sound really good together. And that's one thing I was looking for in a co-host. I was like, the voices have to sound good together. We need to be able to speak without interrupting each other. I get so it's like sawing at my brain when people interrupt me. Similar sense of humor, super important.
Yeah.
To have like a common knowledge base to draw upon, so we know when to laugh at each other's jokes.
Yeah.
And I was like,
sure.
okay, I need to approach this person and ask them to be my co-host.
Why, thank you. I was very flattered that you would consider me.
I was like, hey, stranger, person I've met like 2 times.
I felt like we knew each other well.
Yeah.
Like, we'd sat down and had coffee. I talk so fast. I managed to push 10 years of friendship into 2 hours.
I love that. I remember before I asked you to be my co-host, I was a little bit hesitant, only because, you know, I had some worries. I was like, okay, I don't want to scare this person off. I want to be as open and upfront as possible about my expectations, about my standards, and see if this person is actually up for it. Because I knew it was going to take a lot of work. I knew it was going to be time consuming, and I didn't want to be like, oh yeah, it'll be fun and partying all the time. And then have to pull out because it's like, oh, this isn't what I signed up for.
Yes.
Yeah.
I also was kind of like, oh no, what have I agreed to? It's an actual commitment, a podcast. Like, you can't just start and then drop out. Like, that would not look good for a podcast. Because also with Fibro, I have to really kind of restrict myself in what I can really commit to. And lucky for you, I was going through a period of being more open to things.
So I caught you when your defenses were down?
Yeah. But not just, like, I was kind of like, no, this is a great opportunity. I want to jump on this. Not just...
I was an opportunity.
Yeah. I'm like, this person seems like they know what they're... This person is committed to things, like, and that's something I've had issues with, is I'm like just getting sick of kind of like flakiness.
And this is before you knew that I took a Skype call while I was in active labor.
Yes, that is correct.
Because I committed to it.
Yeah, and I'm the same. Like, if I say I'm going to do something, I'm going to be there. Like, unless I'm sick or something and I have to pull out.
Yep.
I'm not just going to be like, I don't feel like doing it.
Yeah. And I think the other issue was that I had, and I know that when we originally discussed the concept for the podcast, I had these ideas, the original thoughts for how I wanted things to go. And I knew there was potential for things to change, but because we were starting from zero, I was like, I have no idea what we're committing to here, really. Example, I originally wanted to release each episode weekly.
Yes, you did.
Yes. And I'm so thankful that that we didn't commit to a weekly podcast.
Yeah, I was fairly against the idea of weekly.
Even when I talked to Tony about it, they're like, I don't think you should do that, Leslie.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, fine.
I thought monthly, and we settled on fortnightly.
Yeah. And given the fact that we release these longer episodes, like an hour and a half plus, I think we probably could have gotten away with a monthly episode with like peppering little mini-sodes in between.
Yeah.
But one thing that's been great about keeping up with this fortnightly schedule is that it helps us stay in the right zone.
Yes.
Because knowing that we're putting this together as a season means that when we see a good point to wind down and say, okay, we're going to do 2 or 3 more episodes, then we're going to stop for a while, regroup, prepare for season 2, that would happen quite naturally.
Yes.
As opposed to like when I started my YouTube channel, I was like, I'm just going to keep cranking out videos. And then I felt like I had to just keep making videos for the sake of making videos.
Yeah.
Not that I have any regrets about that. It's just, it's much nicer to look at it as kind of like an album, like a concept album.
The YouTube algorithm doesn't let you have breaks.
Yeah.
It's just the rule.
Yeah.
So, but podcasting's different.
Yeah.
It's not the same.
And I remember also I originally wanted to make this a video podcast. Do you remember that? Or did I hide that fact from you?
You might not have ever brought that up.
Okay, maybe it was that short-lived. I was like, how can we do video and audio together in terms of editing? And
Maybe
my
in the
gosh.
future.
Well, I even talked to my friend Jimmy about the possibility of getting some help with that, even if, because he does video production and stuff. He's like, okay, so what you're looking at is like a multicam setup with blah, 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 this and that. And I was like, maybe we won't do that for every single episode. I'm still open to maybe at some point doing like a video episode just as like a thing.
I would be so much more stressed knowing I had to come presentable.
Yeah. It's so much nicer and it's so much easier editing just audio.
Yeah, and people wouldn't have known that episode where I was so like down with fibro fatigue that I had to lie on the couch and aim the microphone down at my face. I couldn't have hid that.
The body positions that we have to put ourselves in sometimes just to get through a recording is just funny to me.
Oh, yeah.
But that's another good reason to record in my office as opposed to at the library.
Yes, it is.
So that was another big change of plans that occurred, wasn't it?
It was.
Yeah.
And one I'm very grateful of, but was a lot more of an investment on your side.
Yeah. At these amazing libraries that we have here, provided by the Brisbane City Council, they have podcasting equipment that you can they loan out. Well, you book some time with the equipment in one of their meeting rooms. What, in like 2-hour lots maximum?
They
generally?
prefer you to keep to about a 2-hour slot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's great because it's free access to professional podcasting equipment.
Yeah.
And we were like, all right, we don't have to pay anything for equipment, rock and roll. But then scheduling, it's like it was very restrictive for what we wanted to do because we had to be available at the same time as there was availability for the equipment in the library to record episodes that we could do like in one shot within a 2-hour block.
Yes. Which is really hard when you're learning as well, because we kept having to do like redos on certain bits.
Oh yeah. Didn't we do our preface episode twice?
Oh, likely, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I just recalled that. So the equipment that they had on loan was like a Rodecaster, like kind of the original Rodecaster board, and like the pod mics and the stands, like really good equipment. And I started looking at like cheap alternatives that I could just buy and that we could just have. And then I was like, you know what? Screw it. I'm just going to buy everything that they have.
Yeah.
I'm just going to copy what they have. And managed to find a pretty good kit, like bundle, through Gumtree, of all places.
Oh, wow.
Not even Facebook Marketplace.
Gumtree's still alive?
Yeah. Yeah. And I had to add to it periodically because do you remember when we did our first couple of episodes, we didn't have pop filters. We didn't have the boom arms. So we were kind of bending over the mic stands.
Yeah.
And I remember during the editing process, just constantly having to edit out long instances of us going, catching our breath.
And drifting away from the mic because we weren't comfortable.
Yeah, yeah.
Which is the same at the library as well.
Yes.
I kept having to tell guests on my other one to like keep coming back to the mic.
Yeah, it's like, make yourself uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I bought the boom arms, I bought the pop filters, and like that was a game changer.
Yeah.
When I had those things in place.
I can fully get this right up to my mouth like that, and I can sit back. Back support.
And the fact that I can keep it in my office, it means that we're not beholden to anyone else's schedule. We can just do it whenever we can, or well, not beholden to the library schedule. Yeah. If we want to come in here at midnight one night because we know how to party, then we can do that. I still keep stuff in their original boxes so I can hide bits around in the office. Because if I had one big case, it would just be this like big block sitting in what's actually quite a nice, cozy room that I've created. Yeah. And it was also important because originally we wanted to have, we even had a schedule that we were writing out. For every single episode, we wanted to have a guest.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we're like, this will be great. We can match each guest with the book based on their background, based on their expertise. And we were quite committed to that as a plan. But then we were getting ready to record our first chapter. Like we did the preface just to talk about how we were setting everything up and what we expected for the podcast. And then chapter 1, the first book was No Excuses by Brian Tracy. We had a guest lined up for that discussion. And then with quite short notice, they had to pull out. Yeah. And we were like, oh, crap. Now what?
Yeah.
So we decided to just do it as a duo.
Yeah. And I mean, at this point, it is a bit hard with guests because they're doing us a favor, really. We haven't got a lot to offer them in return.
Yeah.
So it's, at this point, I think it's a good option is to have guests when we can.
Yeah.
And do the books ourselves when we can't get a guest.
Yeah.
Or
in a way, that first like guest pulling out incident was a blessing in disguise.
Yeah,
because
I think so.
I still actually listen back to that first episode and quite fondly. Fondly. Because that's really where we started to get to know each other as book discussers.
Yes.
And where we got to just play around with our jokes and this and that and learned about our loves for Ryan Reynolds and Gosling.
Yeah. And if I remember correctly, we kind of like screwed up a bit about the recording or something. We had to come back and do some patch bits.
Yeah, we had to record pickups later at some
Yeah.
stage.
Yeah.
And I was still learning Audacity in its current form. Like I was using Audacity back in 2007, and a lot of it, the functions have remained the same, but it is different. And the fact that it was just the two of us made it so much simpler to understand, to become a lot more efficient with the multi-track editing. I bloody love the multi-track editing as an option.
Yeah.
Just, by the way.
Yeah.
And I was having like major problems with clipping and stuff like that. But luckily Tony has experience with audio editing, so they were able to help me out with a few tweaks. But for the most part, it was just me having taught myself, because I'm very big on being self-taught with most things. And our whole audio engineering component of the whole thing is something that we're still refining.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I still have to clean my contacts on my recording equipment.
And I keep forgetting to bring the contact cleaner.
But that's also a good lead-in to some of the challenges that we've faced along the way in our journey. So does anything in particular come up for you when I say that?
I think the thing that's most standing out to me is how much smoother and more efficient our process is becoming. Like those first few times were marathons.
Oh my
like we were here for like 5 hours at a time.
Oh,
or
at
something.
least.
Yeah, and just chaotic, really. We
Yeah.
didn't really know what we're doing. Whereas now we're starting to get into this groove of having our like running sheet and like actually knowing where we need to like pull back, get back on track. And yeah, even you not having to direct me as much in regards to that with my mouth and brain going off in different directions.
And when you've got two neurosparkly folks who are also very, very interesting and have a lot to talk about a lot of things, we get distracted very easily by each other, by a topic. We would go off on these juicy tangents that seemed really interesting to us, but weren't really in the context of the book.
Yeah.
And would be of very little interest to an audience of people who don't know anything about us or don't care about us at all.
And when we have really interesting guests as well, where you just want to
yes.
like chat to them about stuff.
Yeah. And I think in those early days as well, we were still learning so much about each other that everything was so new and exciting.
Yes.
But now we're over it.
We're getting into that like been married for 10 years
Yeah.
space where we're just like, we can sit in silence.
Yes. And I can use my hand gestures to say like, okay, Mika, stop talking.
Yeah.
In a way that you'll understand is me in editing mode.
And you're not worried anymore that I'll be offended by that sort of stuff either.
Yeah.
Because we're both people that are used to meeting people that can't deal with us.
Yes. Yes. We're very used to inadvertently offending people.
Yes.
Just by not having the same kind of thought patterns and behaviors.
The right sensibilities.
Yes. And I think the more I was getting bogged down in the editing process, the more strict I had to become with how we went about the recording process. So it's like when I hear some sort of like meandering or this and that, it's like, okay, I'm shooting myself in the foot if I don't put a stop to this right now. And that goes for like my part in the conversation as well. It's like this section could be like really interesting, or like if I lean too heavily on recording pickups to then insert into the conversation later, it's like, no, that actually is making not just a few more minutes of work for myself, but potentially hours. So I need to have my act together and make sure that I'm saying everything that I want to say within a particularly allotted space of time.
Yes. And that's something that comes in my head too when there's something I want to say. And normally I'll just jump in a conversation and say it. But in my mind, I'm like, Leslie's going to have to edit this.
And I've had to come to accept that there will always be a lot more that I want to say that just won't be included in the episode.
Yeah.
Either because we didn't have time to record it, or because when we did record it, it didn't fit. It didn't fit within the flow of the conversation. I was like, nah, it's too jerky. We need to get rid of it.
Yeah.
You know, I've had to kill my darlings more than once during this process.
I do love having a sheet in front of me where I just take notes of something I wanted to say and we can talk about it later, or it could be a footnote if it's something interesting.
Yes. And I think that's one way in which having footnotes has been super helpful. Because we don't always know what is going to be a footnote before we start recording. I think we rarely have any idea what footnotes we're going to record. It comes up in the conversation where it's like, oh, this is something that is really worth diving into or expanding on. It doesn't really fit within the conversation, but the week after this episode goes live, I can pop in this extra information.
Yes. I also have been curious. Is footnotes a thing that you came up with just for this podcast, or is it a thing that other podcasts use that term?
Well, see, this is a thing. I don't know. I doubt that I came up with the whole thing. I decided on it independently. I'm sure there must be other podcasts that do it or something similar, but
I just mean the term footnote as well.
Possibly. Well, I mean, no, I'm sure other podcasts use the expression footnote for things. I'm not sure exactly how they're using it.
Yeah.
But in terms of our little podcasting universe, it's just an idea that I had the idea on my own, but I doubt that I'm the only one who's doing it.
Okay.
Let's put it that way.
Well, that's what I thought. It's just so book themed. I was like, it works.
Yeah, I wanted to keep everything book themed. And knowing that we were going to be publishing fortnightly, ideally every Monday, I wanted to have something to upload. At the very least, on those like every other week, a full episode, and then that next Monday. I don't always get it done by the Monday, but I try to have those footnotes.
Yeah.
Because it helps to stay front of mind. It helps to still engage with people. And because our episodes are longer, if we were, it gives people time to actually like listen and just chill with the content and get these little bits of extra things if they're kind of like, because a lot of people will listen to podcasts and go, I want my podcasts released consistently on this day at this time every week, or I lose interest.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, here's something to keep you interested.
I've also found the footnotes are just like in general got a good topic of a social issue that we want to talk about, and I've told people, oh, just listen to this thing, that's what we're talking about. And it will introduce them as well to the podcast and to us, which might bring them in to actually listen to the whole thing.
Yeah, I've had conversations like that too. Like the footnote that I recorded about PMDD in relation to who moved my cheese. It's like, you have PMDD. I want to listen to this footnote. And then it's like, this is attached to something much bigger. One of the other challenges that we've dealt with is just the amount of preparation that we sometimes have to do with very short notice.
Yes.
And sometimes that short notice is because we don't always decide on our books in the most timely fashion. I remember when we decided to talk about the 5 love languages, I think it was the day before we were planning to record, that I was like, let's talk about the 5 love languages because it's short.
I think same with Who Moved My Cheese.
Yeah. I've been trying to put together this little list of like shorter personal development books for those short notice periods.
I also have difficulty reading the long ones. Like, I get bored. I do a lot of listening to roundups of the book before trying to read it.
Yes.
So that I know where we're going.
Yes.
I found that with ADHD, that's a big issue of mine. I hate not knowing where we're going when I start. I want to be told we're going to learn this, this, and this.
Yes.
These are the aims. This is what we're trying to achieve. And now I'm looking for details.
Yeah. I find even with books that I am very familiar with, I reread them in full before we begin. And I like to read reviews and watch other content creators' content about the book just to make sure that I'm tapping into what people have already like assessed the book on. I want to make sure I'm not missing some major factor that not to copy what other people are saying, but to know which aspects jump out at people to then give our reflection on.
Yeah, I was thinking that too, that we are trying to do this for other people, not Leslie and Mika's view and opinions of the book.
Yeah.
And
if we wanted to do that, we could do it for much less money and in a much less time-consuming fashion.
Yeah, and we being our very particular selves might not be annoyed by the same things that other people are.
Yeah.
Or see issues with the same things other people do. I think we're pretty empathetic people, so we do try to read from that perspective, but...
Yeah. We are pretty, empathetic. Yes. I've also had to, well, I guess we both have had to work around our issues with neurodivergence even just to get this thing done. How has it come into play for you, Mika?
Running late, forgetting that we have a session on this morning, getting a call from Leslie while I'm still asleep, being like, when are you getting here?
Yeah.
It's good I don't live too far away.
Yeah. And one of the benefits of having an office where I'm just sort of hanging out in here anyway is that, sure, it causes inconveniences in terms of my schedule. It does put me out sometimes.
I'm sorry.
But I, had to learn early on that like podcast recording days, I had to kind of like block out a bunch of time.
Yeah.
More time than I think I'm going to need. And part of that is also just having a background, like working on sets, doing background work as an extra. And seeing just the sheer amount of time that goes into even recording like a 30-second spot.
Yeah.
It's hours and hours and hours of work on some, in some cases. So it's never just like, oh, we're putting together a 2-hour production. It's going to take us 2 hours. No. No.
That would be a movie out every day if that was the case.
Yeah, exactly. And granted, film and television is a completely different beast. But when you're working on something that you have very high standards for, and you are going to go in and edit in detail, it is going to take time at every stage of the process.
Yes.
And that's also where my neurodivergence comes in. Because when I'm editing, one thing I've had to be careful of is, I say a lot of likes and ums, which is filler language, but in my case, particularly depending on where I am in my cycle, sometimes it's legit stuttering. And I lately have been quite mindful of not over-editing myself.
Yeah.
Because it defeats the purpose of being aware of ableism, for example. It's like, if we do speak in a certain way, if we do meander a little bit, I don't want to completely erase that.
Yeah.
Because that, in a way, is an act of ableism.
That's true.
Yeah. So there's this balance that I have to strike between making something that's coherent, understandable, accessible, but also honors our actual level of functioning.
Yeah, I've thought that as well. People have said, "Oh, you sound so intelligent and fluent and well spoken," and I'm like, "That's editing." Like, without the editing, I have a lot of just do and a lot of kind of what's that word? Give me a second.
There are all these values questions that go into my mind when I'm editing around that kind of thing too. And with the last episode that I've just uploaded today, there was a little bit of that too. It's like, okay, there's some mispronunciation, there's some correction of mispronunciation. Like, mispronunciation isn't a bad thing. Like, I could leave that in. But then I was like, but I also don't want to give off the impression that like that I'm kind of, I don't know, like making myself sound good and trying to make you sound less good.
Oh, I see.
Because like my like vocal inclusions that relate to my neurodivergent tend to be masked by a lot of other things that can kind of make my, I don't know. Some people say I sound articulate and intelligent, which I know I do.
Yes.
But I'm not trying to like play into this dynamic. I don't know. There's just a lot of things that I consider when I'm editing. And that's why it takes me so dang long.
I'm a bit sensitive about the language thing too, because I had what people thought was dyslexia as a kid. I'm more convinced now it was actually the epilepsy that I got treatment for as a young adult. And people used to make fun of the way I said stuff or mispronounced things and didn't know. My vocabulary wasn't as wide as it should have been.
Yeah.
Still good, but yeah. People used to underestimate me a lot because of the way I spoke. And that, I guess I am a bit sensitive of, but also am learning to just not care. If people want to think I'm stupid because I say the wrong thing sometimes, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, and I have a long history of people assuming that I'm less intelligent than I am, and some overcompensation over that as well.
Yeah.
That some of these things play on my mind when I'm putting together these episodes. But the other thing, you just reminded me as you picked up your clipboard there, with our neurodivergence, is to stay on track and to stay focused with our conversations. Sometimes we have to be doing multiple things.
Yeah.
Right? I think I've watched you full on knit a sweater while we're having a conversation.
Something like that.
That might be a bit of an exaggeration, but you're always doing something. You're always crafting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If my hands aren't moving, the brain can't tick.
And I think that's great. I've tried to take that into some of my day-to-day life because like there are people who I can spend time around where I'm just like, okay, I am going to be doing something completely unrelated to our conversation because we have that level of trust.
Yeah.
And it's just so much easier on my brain to function that way. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
I'm
I think-
glad
yeah.
that you're trying it.
Yeah, because the only reason I can't really get away with that while we're recording is I'm in like director, editor, producer mode, and I'm trying to go through my notes and tick boxes on my outline and stuff, and it's just if I don't do that, then things will go in a million different directions.
Yeah, on
Yeah.
the one I do on my own, I can't do this.
Yeah, so maybe I get a little envious when we get to the end of a section and you're like, oh, look at this amazing drawing that I just did. I'm like, I want to make amazing drawings, but I can't.
I'm drawing them for the podcast.
Yes. So managing our own energy levels has been a challenge as well. There was one episode that we recorded where I could really hear that we just were not into it.
Mm-hmm.
And we had to stop that one, didn't we?
I think so.
Yeah. And we're like, we don't have it in us. We need to come back and do this.
Oh, that's
later.
right. Yeah, we totally just scrapped everything
Yeah.
and started again.
I think we did that twice. I know we did that with Indistractable. Our first attempt. Yeah, ironically. Our first attempt at discussing Indistractable by Nir Eyal. I think we got like halfway through and we're like, this isn't working.
Yeah. Which, I mean, they do that in other productions as well.
Yeah.
Like, they just kind of like, the director says, you know what, it's not coming through today. Everyone go home and sleep.
Yeah. So I've had to be very like forgiving of myself and of us and just be prepared to just put it down and walk away if we have the luxury of time to do that.
Yeah.
Because I'm also beholden to the allowances on my Buzzsprout subscription.
Maybe you just need a different subscription. Though
You know,
it's
I've
kind
looked
of
at so many, and you know, Buzzsprout is great, and because it's like, okay, you get this monthly quota of like 6 hours that you can upload between this date and this date. It actually helps me stay on the ball as well.
that's what I was just about to say.
To know that there's money behind this, and if I exceed the quota 1 month because I didn't use the quota the previous month, then I have to pay extra money.
Yeah.
That means I am going to record. Like if I had that kind of restriction on my YouTube channel, I wouldn't have a year since I've done a video.
Yeah.
And so thank you, Buzzsprout.
Yeah, I actually like artificial deadlines like that to help me achieve things.
Yes. So that's been very helpful. But other challenges, and something that we're still working through, is like promotion. Like I have some avenues for promoting the podcast, but to any of you listeners out there, any little thing that you can do to help us would be greatly appreciated. You know, tell your friends, share one of the episodes that you thought was really interesting. Leave us a review. Like that's huge in terms of making sure people can find us more easily. Because we do put so much work into this project.
I have actually met a couple of people who haven't met before who have said to me, "Oh, hey, I know you from your podcast." And I'm like, "What?"
I love that.
Or they're like, oh, I've seen you on TikTok. I'm like, I don't have a TikTok. And it was through yours.
Oh, yeah.
And I was like, oh, someone recognized my voice.
You do have a very recognizable voice.
It's one of the things I'm really dysphoric about, my voice, which is funny that I'm on a podcast recording my voice.
I think your voice is great.
Thank you.
All right. So, from this point forward, what are some things that you hope will become of this podcast?
That it is helpful to people. Like, that it gets a bigger audience so people actually, like, have access to it. I mean, wouldn't mind it getting a bit more financially viable.
Oh, that would be lovely.
Like, it's all volunteer time at this point, so it's would be nice that all this time we put in was somehow feeding back into our into our living costs.
Yes, that'd be lovely.
Yeah.
I would love to reach more of the kind of people who need to have this information when they themselves are writing as well. Because there are a lot of people out there in the personal development world who, you know, have yet to write their big book, who might be looking at the world through a very, very narrow lens and can really benefit from understanding what marginalized people experience when consuming personal development media. And that's just for the good of everyone.
Yeah, exactly. It's I don't think most of these writers leave people out or have a skewed perspective because they want to.
Yeah.
Like, it's just hard to know how other people experience the world unless someone tells them.
Yeah. People don't know what they don't know.
Yeah. And it has to be in a way that is going to attract them. Like, sure, you could go on YouTube and look at videos completely unrelated to self-development to learn a bit more about how people see the world, but
yeah,
that won't find them.
Yeah.
The algorithm won't tell them.
Yeah. Yeah. And I really want to continue to be an example for people who are involved in personal development or who are coaches and things like that, but feel this pressure to act perfect or to act enlightened or to act like, oh, they've done all the work and now their work is done. It's like, no, we need to drop this whole fake it till you make it BS. It's not helping anyone. Toxic positivity is a scourge. In order to be successful as a coach, in order to have any validity in the wellness personal development world, you don't have to put on this show that you've figured it all out, that you've got everything together. It's like, come on, I've been working full-time as a life coach for 5 years. And like, I must be doing something right. And it's certainly not because I'm posting just the right pretty pictures on Instagram and making my life look perfect. It's like, heck, no. If anything, I'm rallying against that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So overall, I really want to continue to be part of the change that we want to see in personal development media. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I want to get my editing game down more efficiently. And I want to create more relationships with people who could come on as guests or even like guest co-hosts when you need to go away and stuff like that.
Yeah.
That's something I've been thinking about a lot today, but we'll talk about that another time. And build more of a community around this very, very specific purpose.
Yes. I think that would be really nice. And getting people recommending someone or people being excited to come on because we have something to offer them as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And we do have some guests lined up that we're going to fit in where we can, and hopefully we will be able to bring loads and loads of value into their lives as well, since we're not paying anyone to be on the show.
Yes.
So what do you think our audience can do for us to help this vision expand within the world?
I mean, in these early days in podcasts, every person that you can suggest an episode to and get someone listening to, even if it's a footnote that you think has just a little bit of interest, that will increase our audience by a much higher percentage than it does in the future when we have a larger audience.
Yeah.
Like, it makes that much more difference for young podcasts.
Yes.
So, yeah, please, if you're listening, share something.
Yeah.
Get it out there.
Yeah.
Even if you just, like, share a clip of what we're talking about.
Yeah. Yeah. It all helps.
It really does.
Yeah. And reach out to us directly as well.
Oh, yeah. Would love that.
Yeah.
Suggestions for books that they would like to hear about too.
Yeah, book suggestions. If you are an author who does have a deep understanding of intersectionality that you include in your work, I want to hear from you as well, because I've got some thoughts about future bonus episodes.
Yeah.
And the best way to get in touch with us is really to go through my Instagram. Yeah.
Nice.
So you can find me at Leslie V Coaching, LESLIE V Coaching. And my website, leslievcoaching.com. You can get in touch with me through there. Send me an email, hello@leslievcoaching.com. Tell us what you like. Tell us what you're not that into with the stuff that we're doing. If you have suggested us to a friend or to a community, let us know. Just engage. Engage. Yeah. And yeah, follow me on Instagram as well, because that's where I will be posting about various things that we're up to.
I guess I'd like to know too if there's something I say that people disagree with, because like if it's reasonable. Like, I'm all up for hearing a new perspective and maybe changing my mind.
Yeah, we're all about growth.
Yeah. I sometimes go home and, like, think about stuff I've said and, like, oh, man, I don't know if I liked the way I said that.
You're like, that's okay. Leslie will edit it out.
Or I just have to live with it.
Yeah. All right. So I think that's a pretty good roundup of our podcasting journey so far. You think?
I think so. Like,
I think so too.
We are getting there. The podcast is getting so much more fluent, I think.
Yes.
It's less stressful. I'm so much less, like, stressed out and, like, like, the first few times I was just getting really worked up, and it was taking a lot of spoons.
Yeah.
Energy spoons.
Yeah.
So, yeah, now I'm actually quite excited to come in and record.
I'm not so scary anymore.
Well, it's more like personal pressure as well.
Okay.
I don't feel like, because me holding my tongue takes a lot of energy a lot of times, but now I'm starting to get used to it as a pattern.
Yeah.
And your like expressions and signals and stuff, I'm like, oh, I get it.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm very expressive, aren't I?
Yes, even if I can't see most of your face past the pop filter.
All right. Well, thank you, Mika. This has been great. A nice little trip down memory lane.
Yeah, it is. I thank you, Leslie, for having me here as your co-host. I feel very special.
Thank you for sticking with me this long.
Of course. As I said, when I commit to something, I commit.
Yes. All right. And thank you to our listeners. And we look forward to having you as our continued ride or dies for the rest of our journey.
Yeah.
And beyond.
We love you guys.
We love you.
Or platonically love.
Oh, yeah, that's an option as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, let me clean this pop filter. All right. Bye.
Bye.